Okay, so we're here at part 9. So in this, I'm continuing to refine everything that I'm working on. Hope everybody's having a great day and evening wherever you're at. Again, this is Brett Tadlock, a tan artist. So yeah, so anyway, so just continuing to refine here. Wanted to make the nose breaker stand off a little bit more from the nose and everything else, so that way it kind of gets that it doesn't look like it's squishing the nose, which I looked at a lot of references of this style, both this and like other ones that had different nose breakers to try and see, but a lot of them on a front on shot did look like they were almost laying on the nose, but then from the side they'd stick out. So wanted to add a little bit of shadow to kind of make it stand out a little bit more. So what I've done is create another layer, and I'm working with pencil and then a little smudging. So once I think I got that down to where I like it, I was getting ready to move on to the fabric and start bringing that into focus a little more. Kind of thinking maybe some plaid or something similar for this. And this guy's really a mix of different stuff. I mean, ideally, if you look at it, you've got some of the stuff from like the Middle East. You've got some stuff from like Viking, type stuff. And you've got some just generic fantasy type stuff. So anyway, again, this is not meant to be a specific person or anything like that. It's more of just a fantasy warrior type design. So trying to get it laid out and see what I like. So for the red fabric here, I was using the marker tool and kind of playing around with it, but then I realized it's starting to get a little too soft and I wanted to add some texture back into it. So I switched to the acrylic brush with no water in it really, and I'm dry brushing on that red, and then I decided to add some yellow in, because to me that adds a little bit more texture and feel of fabric. So similar type stuff if I would do if this was a traditional painting. Was trying to build it up and build the colors, but then I realized that it's still kind of flattening out, so I wanted to add some different colors to it. So changing the red up a little bit more of an orangish maroon, and look at that. And then I was also looking at some N.C. Wyeth paintings to see how he handled a lot of his fabrics and stuff. So I have several N.C. Wyeth books, and look online real quick and stuff too. So that's what I was doing here. And then I realized I wanted to put this kind of golden color on it to break up the red, because it was getting too red and too flat in my opinion. So that's kind of what I'm doing here, is trying to figure out. And so I laid that on there, I was trying to figure out if I liked it or not. And then I kind of did, so I wanted to dry brush some more of it on, and that's kind of what I'm doing here, is pushing some of that red back and adding some extra texture and trying to get kind of what I like with it. So also trying to go with the kind of the direction of the flow, not necessarily the pattern on it, and see what I like, and then kind of tighten up some of the pattern stuff with the going back and forth maroon and all that. So and then from there, kind of a rusty color, dark rusty color, to try and lay in some more of the folds and everything else for that. So getting it positioned and laid out. And so I think it's starting to come together. It was given a much more coherent look by dry brushing that in, and it kind of gives that subtle feel of folded fabric and maybe a plaid kind of color on it. So the main thing is trying to remember to go back and forth and work both sides as I'm doing it. So this one needed a little bit more of the reddish color and laid in, and some of the other stuff. And then I also realized I didn't like how I was starting to do the edging on this fabric, so I wanted it to be more of almost like a fringe kind of look. So I started dry brushing some of that on there, because to me that gives it a real good loose fabric kind of look, and I really liked it. I wasn't sure if I would or not, but I did, so I decided to keep it. And I thought, well, I want to make this look like almost like rope, cordage. That's kind of where the fringe is coming from. Gives a little bit of extra detail, but not over the top kind of stuff. So that's what I'm doing there, and pulling from those medallions. So again, remembering to work from the colors that I have on the painting to try and get some stuff. So for the fabric of the tunic, the armor under tunic, I am using the chalk tool, which I'm still getting used to that. I mean, it's a nice tool, gives some great texture, but if you push slightly too hard, you get a really deep smudge. So I've got to really get more play around with that. But this is, again, just layering in some texture, some underpainting that I'm going to go back over with the watercolor brush, because I wanted to lay in some extra different textures and kind of play around with it. So so again, still using chalk, and you'll see right there I just got a smudge that it was kind of just barely pressing too hard, really. The tablet I have is sensitive and it does a good job, so I don't have to usually be overly careful. It's just that one chalk tool kind of goes to extremes, in my opinion. So trying to figure out a little bit more of laying it in, getting it to sink back behind everything, and do that. So I realized I'll take the ink tool and kind of draw in some darker lines and then maybe fade them out and that kind of stuff, so it kind of pushes everything back into it, and getting it, kind of structured the way I like it. So I was doing this and kind of switching between the ink tool and the smudge, not the smudge tool, but really the blending tool, and wondering if I liked it or not, and kind of sitting back and looking at it. And then I thought, you know what, this is where I want to try and maybe use some of the watercolor features. So throwing some texture in over top of it, letting it bleed out ever so slightly, and switching to the Filbert watercolor brush. And I started liking that a little more because I thought it was softer, but yet not an airbrush kind of look. It kept more of the texture for it. So that's what I started doing, then going back in with originally thinking, okay, I'll go back with the ink tool, then kind of smear that over top of the watercolor, and asking myself, do I like it, do I not? Definitely has some good stuff and some stuff I don't really care for, but I was still trying to find my way for how I wanted this to look and kind of play around with it. And then as I was sitting here doing that, I realized that that I can use where Rebelle excels at, and start using some of the water to let it bleed naturally. So that's what I did here. I turned the water content up in the ink up so it would bleed a little bit. So basically I'm putting it on, letting it bleed, then hitting the not the dry tool, but the one that sort of dries it most of the way. The name is escaping me right now for some reason, but you can see it bleeds a little bit, and I go kind of stop the bleed, and then kind of keep going back and forth. And to me, that's given it a much more fabric, natural, kind of a stiff fabric feel. And getting that. I also realized right here, I was like, oh wait, you can't really see his neck. You would be able to see some skin underneath here, even if he had an under tunic on under the other one. So I wanted to have that showing a little bit and just kind of be hinted at. So to me, it kind of pulls the neck together with everything else. And I realized too, is like, okay, I want to put a little trim on, kind of an edging on this. So I did that with the yellow and gold, but it was a little too harsh and too much of a contrast. So I decided to go back and try and soften some of it in. And again, using the ink tool, the ink pen, to let it bleed out a little bit and soften, and then taking the blending tool and softening it a little more so that it does kind of seem like it's more part of the edge. But I realized that was still too stark, so I got some of the brass color from his nose breaker, and then kind of started laying that in as well to see kind of what I can get it to do. So then again, just laying in, letting it bleed, partially drying it. I thought that was kind of a neat effect right there that just kind of happened. It was a little spiky on one part, but I thought, well, I can clean it up. But I liked the way it just kind of bled a little bit on the left side there, so I decided to keep it and just keep playing it back. So the other one I started light and went dark and learned from that. So this one I started darker and started bringing it up light. Wanted to add a little bit more over texture to the shadows I'd put in. So that's what I'm doing here, and trying to get it to kind of be more cohesive. And again, I'm really wanting more of a almost canvas kind of feel, and just kind of checking. I like to go back and kind of turn it on, turn it off as far as the way looking at the layers to see if I like the direction it's going. So I've gotten this part done, and I realized, okay, there's really kind of a leather strap that goes across and is holding the cloak on. And so I wanted to take this rectangle-ish looking area and start turning that into looking like leather. So the main way to start that is lay down some base color, and then from there, refine the edges a little bit, make sure that I've got all the other stuff around it kind of going to those edges and stopping, and starting to sit behind everything. So that's what I was doing here and laying it out. And then I decided, okay, from there, what I need to do next is start really laying in the base color. So I did that, and it was starting to give me, it's kind of the texture I'm looking for. Leather is still one of those things that I need to work a little bit more on, I think, and kind of push myself some more. So what I did here was those are stencils I use for making rocks and adding texture to rocks. So I put it on there. I turned on the border mode, which means that the only thing exposed is that cutout area completely for the whole picture, and then started using that to lay in different textures. And that gave it a pretty decent, but the colors are still a little not coherent yet. And so I wanted to try and bring it together. So I, again, using the same stencil, I just turned it a little bit and then used some of that to lay in some darks and kind of get it pulled together more. So decided that I kind of like how it's doing, and so I just keep laying it in a little bit more and pushing and pulling to get that leathery texture on it, and seeing what I like and what I don't like. And I realized it's there, but it's not there. So what I decided to do was to take and make a copy of it and jump that over to its own layer, and then from there set it to multiply. And the reason I'm doing this is kind of like when I did with the metal. So I take it, erase out the over stuff that I copied to the layer, and get it kind of situated so the way I like it. And then I'm going to transform it just slightly after I grab it here and stretch it out so it meets there, and I can kind of contort it to be a little bit more like I want. Then erase out so the medallions look like they're on top. And from here, start erasing out highlights. And I like how this worked. I thought it worked really well because it keeps some of that texture from below, but it keeps some of that rough, worn leather look for this part. So is it perfect? No. I did realize that reducing the opacity I thought helped. And I blended it, merged it down, and then I realized maybe I want to do some more to it, so then I unmerged it and love that undo button sometimes, and did just a slight touch, and then I merged it back. So kind of like this, and I thought, okay, I want a chain, because I had looked at Kingdom of Heaven and Saladin, I believe. Then there's a chain going his, and part of this is definitely pulled from inspiration from that. So not trying to copy it at all, but trying to really some of the stuff that I liked from it. I was like, okay, from this, and then some other stuff I looked at from N.C. Wyeth, and some of it's just imagination. And so this was, I wanted to put a chain here. So the way I decided to do it was lay down this color for a shadow, darker part of the chain, and then take the color, the light gray, and with the pencil tool sketch in the links for where they go. And really those links, it's one of those things where you sit there and you go, how am I going to do this? I don't know how to do it. And then I realized, really it's just a bunch of bananas. so I went bananas and laid it on there and started making the chains. And I thought it came out looking pretty good for just a quick chain to kind of go through it. Almost reminds me of a dog collar, but for really one of the first times I've drawn a chain like this, I thought it turned out pretty good. So I'm taking the marker tool here and lightly going over it to smooth that out, because that was a little too rough that was on there, and trying to smooth it and make it look a little better, and then going in and cleaning up the dark side of it with an eraser and crisping up some of the edges a little bit and seeing how I like it. Which, it got a lot of the way to where I liked it here, and but I still realized I wanted to blend it back a little more. So again, the marker tool and the gray color, and then just trying to figure out, do I need to change the opacity or anything, which I did slightly, and then I merged it, not merged it, but I went to the underlayer below it and added in a shadow for it, so that way it looks like it's sitting up off of the other armor. So and then added some more in there. So kind of hitting the home stretch for this video. In the next one, I'm going to try probably to finish this up, because I think we've had 9 videos now, so we might as well finish on 10, a nice even number, and see if I can kind of pull it all together, fix some stuff. There's some things I want to do with the beard and try and get that. So again, hope you're enjoying this. Hope people are learning something from it. I have some positive messages here and there that I've gotten from it. If there's any thoughts you have, I'm open to constructive criticism. So if you see something you're like, hey, I don't think that quite looks right, or maybe try this next time or something like that, I'm open to it. You may not be an artist yourself, or you may be starting out, but everybody's got feedback that can be helpful and constructive. So that's the key, is just be constructive. So yeah, so we've reached the end of this. I hope you've enjoyed it. I'm going to try and get the next one up quicker. I've just been really busy and haven't had a chance to work on this much at all since this past week. But I really hope you're enjoying it. And don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell notification, and come on over to Facebook and join us there and have some great conversations. All right. Appreciate it. Thanks for watching.